just want to say today could have been a very different day. On February 29th of 2020, I was in a position where I understand that during that time, a very substantial amount of money had cleared an account in my name based on my work and restitution in consideration of efforts that had been a part of my ongoing investigations, reports, had actually yielded that kind of a recovery. And at the time, I understood there was a need. This was the third time, yes, it was, the third time I had actively apprised myself of a variety of factors that were at work at the time and resources that at least temporarily were available that could have allowed a situation where people whose resource acquisition was being used as part of some sort of political brokering would actually have their needs attended to without having to leverage. Why? Because somebody had actually done their job. And those resources were available when there was an actual real emergency without having to kick back and kick back and kick back. This was the third time. And in this particular case, we were talking about access to a sum that totaled $2 billion. I contend that $2 billion at that point in time was mine. Now, there have been many times when there have been moments when I understand my direct efforts have yielded a recovery or have yielded some sort of return on investment. But because you all have refused to actually acknowledge me personally in person, well, then whatever credit you would need in order to establish your credibility ends up being marred, right? Marred. So I'm just going to remind you that on February 29th of 2020, there were at that time in Texas available a number of ranches with substantial acreage that would have then had a certain kind of zoning associated with them and would have had a certain kind of commitment regarding property taxes and would have had a certain kind of commitment in regards to a variety of other factors, including security and or water access or the actual capacity to be able to tap into the local electrical system or maybe have your own microgrid. These things exist, right? And I have the primary materials available, and I have all of the amounts that they were listed for at the time. And those primary source materials would have had the brokers, they would have had the process you would have had to go through. And right now, I actually have all of the documents I would need. Even if, for some reason, it might take a while to actually get the full recovery from this specific act of fraud that happened, which would be quite substantial. It may allow for another opportunity like this to be availed of in a very meaningful way. And these properties could have been a part of, and would have, and actually are, a part of that more comprehensive strategy that comports itself within my first business plan that I presented in the state of Texas prior to being kidnapped. You see, that was my business plan. And it may not be so incompatible with other women in Texas, specifically women from Texas, even ones that may have a blemish or two on their criminal record, maybe a trespassing charge or two, and yet still very qualified, and with a little bit of assistance and support, could have been well on their way to helping other women become homeowners, property owners, or participate in some sort of cooperative or collective land and home holding arrangement based upon being actively and willingly engaged. But all of this would have been on the private side of the economic arrangements. I'm not talking about HUD. I'm not talking about any sort of HHS subsidy. I'm not talking about anything that you get as part of a special project in some sort of PPP. You know, the other PPP, public private partnership, that allows someone to temporarily use your domicile for tax clearing purposes, right? I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about all that stuff that people try to hustle as part of their alternative political campaigning they don't disclose to you, and usually like to value at a level way, 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 way less than it would have been on the open market, so they don't even have to declare it as a gift on their ethics report, right? No, no, no. I'm talking about those recoveries would have been able to be available and to be duly invested here in the state of Texas in a completely legal manner. Now, unfortunately, the resources available would give this a particular kind of characterization and comportment that would be a bit distinct from what was available at that time. But please remember, February 2020 had not yet seen the formal declaration of the situation regarding COVID 19, and hence the response at that time would have provided a specific kind of protection, a specific kind of safety for the people who had need of it then. And insofar as there are people that still have need of it right now, the resources are right here and available. The cause is just. The problem is, you guys keep refusing to admit what's really going on. And if you actually did need insurance, it would already have been acquired, and you would have already had a track record of making sure it had been duly applied within the bounds of the law. But you just refuse to do that so far. What do you say today you avail yourself of that opportunity? And so that within the next 10 days, instead of hearing more of this charlatanry and ballyhooing and all this other situation going on, you give me the equivalent valuation and or land and or house holdings according to what was available at that time that you intentionally dispossessed me of. Because why? Because you were broker in HUD. You made me your 26 at that time, and you expected my ass to be out of here. And the problem is, whoever it was that you wanted to create this simulation here while I was kidnapped, that I was a desperate woman in need of being evicted, had access to these kind of resources, but they had a very different anticipation of what they were going to do with them. Those were not their holdings. Those were mine. And the thing is, they were mine with a good faith intent that while I made a very good faith effort to engage members of my community, including leadership within my community, in an effort to assure that our resources were safe, secured, and that would provide a foundation for us being able to take care of our children. We don't need you paying us $300 as a bribe to keep quiet about what your intentions are. If you can't tell us directly what your intentions are, you shouldn't be anywhere near them. And once you realize that what you did here was the crime it is, you're going to understand none of what you tried to do since then was justified. Don't give me any of this that anything ended up happening. No. I did not create the material conditions for anything to be put into a situation where you or your loved ones were left vulnerable to the elements. Let's put it that way. Right? I'm grateful that after 3 years on the street without even a fucking tent, that I'm able to sleep inside right now. But the terms of sleeping inside are not always worth extending gratitude when it's not deserved. If you had given me the money to be able to take care of this, by now, I'd be mighty grateful for you actually applying the law and being the people you said you were, right? Gratitude has its cost. You get what you pay for.